It's cold.
It is
probably start
cold.
Shivering.
Yeah, I swear, in my hometown in upstate New York, it's 68 degrees today.
Oh, wow.
And I left there in order to be in the warm desert so I could sleep in my van.
Right.
And turns out my plot was foiled, you know? I'm seeing all these pictures of people enjoying the outside.
Right. We're
What
in
happened?
a warming trend. It'll be in the 50s next week.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what.
And how bad does it get? Does it get down to this cold? Like, this is about as bad as it's going to get?
No. We can get an inversion that keeps the cold air trapped, and it can stay in the 30s for, it's the daytime high for weeks. For a
my
month.
God.
Yeah. Not every winter. It's a thing that happens. But it can also get, the nighttime lows can be down in the teens. Here.
And that's tough. And how do you deal with that? As somebody, you sleep outside?
I sleep in a tent.
Sleep in a tent? Sorry.
Which has a heater.
Oh, really?
At the hostel, I plug in to electricity, so I have a heater.
Oh, that's great.
If I'm out in the bush somewhere, I have what's called a Norwegian tent heater, which runs on isopropyl alcohol.
Oh, really?
Leave it to the Norwegians to come up with a thing like that. But it's totally adequate. I mean, I can make the tent 100 degrees if I want, if I turn it on.
So it's burning alcohol in the tent, and that warms it up? Like, there's no danger of a fire or anything?
No. It's a solid, heavy, squat sort of construction that it would be. You would really have to hit it to tip it over, and even if you did that, it probably would just go out.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a flame that.
There is some concern with off-gassing. That's why you use it in a tent. You don't want to seal it up too tight.
Okay.
It doesn't burn perfectly. It's carbureted and burns pretty cleanly, but there are some fumes. Yes.
Okay, so off gassing, you said that's gas that's not being burned, it's leaking into your
correct.
tent.
Incomplete combustion, there's some of that. But it's not, people use them to heat, it's called a marine heater, so you would use it to heat a boat's cabin,
okay.
which are sealed up pretty tight.
Okay.
But it's a perfectly reasonable thing.
And you have an alcohol one for the bush and for the cave. So you lived, when I first met you, you told me you lived in a cave.
Well, let's just say I camped in a tent that happened to be pitched in a cave.
The tent is the shelter.
Yeah, the tent is the shelter to keep things clean and organized.
Yeah.
It just happened to be in this cave down King Creek, yeah.
Down King Creek, and it's owned, but you have like a landlord. The guy owns the cave.
Correct. There's a wealthy individual in town who owns a lot of that land along the river, and he just sold a big chunk along the bottom near the river for a campground extension. I think they're just expanding a campground, right? But he owns what we call the cliffside, which is away from the river. And there's a number of people paying rent to him.
Do you have a little neighborhood there? People live nearby?
Yeah, loose. It's all spread out along several miles of the river. But, nobody really talks to each other that much. Some visit, yeah.
And I heard you told me the cave was like as big as an airplane hangar. Is that right?
Yeah, you could park a couple of F-15s in there. No, really, it's very, it's hard to describe. It's been squared off, so it's very rectilinear, and it's been gravelized to keep the red sand dust down. So you have some gravel dust, but it's very clean and it's spare.
Yeah.
There's not much in there. Yeah.
And you sleep out in the tent, and you do have a pad because you're not right in the gravel. You have some sort of pad to lie on. Oh
yeah, I have when I'm sleeping this way, I have a nice trifold,
a cot.
Thick, not a cot, but it's a pad, a trifold kind of. Yeah, it's totally comfortable.
Nice.
It's not like a thermarest that you would take backpacking or something.
Okay.
Which is that's what I would do if I was traveling. But,
it's a little bigger. You can put it on the bike rig.
Yeah, you can spread out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it just stays in the tent. It's not a traveling thing at all. Yeah.
When you're staying, because you're a writer, when you're staying in the cave, when you're living in this way in the tent, how are you getting writing done? Where are you writing?
So having the tent out away from town is sort of the optimum setup for me. I've discovered when I've lived in different towns in the Intermountain West, this is what I like. I like living out in kind of a natural setting, away from the human-built environment, so that there's wildlife and more exposure to the natural elements and weather and so forth. But then I like to be able to bike into town every day. I come in every day.
Every day.
Yeah, and then access the culture of whatever's going on in the town, the library, the coffee houses, the public spaces, the scene, which is right here. It's kind of a scene, but the lizard is a scene, and there's some of the bike shops are kind of scene.
What's the lizard?
That's the Lazy Lizard Hostel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where you're staying now. So you recently moved this past weekend. You moved from the cave to the hostel.
Right, for the winter.
For the winter, because it's got like shelter, more shelter.
Well, because of the COVID situation, I had no place to write in the afternoons once it got cold.
Yeah.
So now that I'm back there, if all else fails, like today, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. It's too cold for me to sit out here and write.
I know.
And everything else is shut down.
Yeah. The library is appointment only. I thought about getting a room at the library, like a study room would be good for something like this, like a small room we could be in.
They have that actually.
They have that, but they have 30-minute appointments for all library business.
Right.
An appointment only, and you could pick up stuff and then leave. It's very much controlled, which I guess I don't know. Is it because Moab has got so much outdoor space that usually it's totally fine to be outdoors that they're shut down more than even New York is right now?
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a problem. So that was the main impetus for going back to the Lizard, was that I knew that if I couldn't find a location downtown, I could just hike it on back up and just write my tent or write in one of the buildings.
They have spaces, like community spaces you can be in.
Right.
Which is
But that's not my preference. When I come downtown, I really like to stay all day. So I have a friend who's the maintenance guy over at McStiff's Plaza, right a block over, and he thinks he might be able to let me just use his maintenance shed to write in. He's a good pal of mine. So I'll check with him here in a little
The maintenance shed of what?
They call it McStiff's Plaza because it was McStiff's restaurant, but it just sold, so it's no longer.
Okay, right.
I don't even know if it's McStiff's Plaza. Eddie McStiff used to own it. Yeah, the joke there, the waiters at the restaurant would always say, "Curses, McStiffed again." That was the joke.
And that's just good, clean fun, of course.
Yeah.
McStiffed, yeah.
Yeah.
What a name, McStiffed.
McStiffed, yeah.
So you're a writer. How long? So you wrote. Yeah, you wrote Island Despair, which I read last night, which is it's such a great book. And you said you wrote that a long time ago. How long ago did you write that book?
20 years.
20 years ago?
I'm 63. I started writing that book when I was about 30. I just come back to the lower 48 from Alaska. And I wrote what I thought was a complete version. It was only maybe a 30-page story. And it kicked around that way for a while, then it got expanded on. And 10 years later, I'd gone on to work on other things, but 10 years later I was doing an open mic reading in San Francisco with Island Despair. Just
of the story?
Just one of those things at a bar, there's a lot of that.
Oh, yeah.
There used to be a lot of that.
Comedians do the same thing, open mics and bars,
And I was approached by Freedom Voices, the publishing company, who mostly published street poets and tenderloin kind of writers, and they weren't really interested in a guy from Wyoming. That's where I was from at the time. And I think another year or two went by, and they contacted me and said they were doing some joint projects with City Lights Books, the Beat Poet book store. And we're
where is City Lights? Because I've heard of it,
North
but
Beach.
Okay.
San Francisco, North Beach. Yeah, it's Kerouac and
yes.
Right.
That's why I've heard of it in the context of the Beats.
Great bookstore. And they were expanding their range, so they would be more open to a out-of-state, out-of-city writer. So that started a process of getting Island Despair edited and really honed, and then they published it in a small press way.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was good. I went and did a tour and around the city and read at different places.
Where was your life at that point? You're 43. Is that right?
I was in my early 40s at that time. Yeah.
And what was happening in your life at that point? Were you working? Were you living?
I was living summers on a horse ranch in Wyoming. I was working as a cook and a horse packer. It was for an outdoor school.
What's a horse packer? Packing like a load?
We were packing rations into backpacking and mountaineering expeditions in the Wind River Range. And it was part of an outdoor education program that goes on up there, right? So, and then I would also cook at the ranch, so doing that and writing. I was still writing.
You're writing.
Yeah, working.
And then how did your life change at that point when you got published?
Oh, no
what
change.
happened? Yeah.
It wasn't. I might have made $1,000 off of Island Despair total. So.
Oh man.
No changes.
I'm sorry. Well,
that's okay.
The movie rights, who knows? You know what I mean? You never know.
Yeah.
You could have Timothy Chalamet playing the main character. Who knows?
Yeah.
It could-
Who knows? No changes that way, but it was, of course, reaffirming to be published.
Of course,
And
yeah,
get
the
exposure.
validation of it.
Validation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And but then I kind of screwed up. When I Freedom Voices sat me down when the book was coming out. They said, "Now, Marlow, we've put a lot of time and energy into your little book, and we're going to all make a little bit of money. We won't make a lot of money. This is a small press. And we would really like to see another book in a reasonable amount of time. 3 years, 4 years, 2 years?" And I just kind of screwed up. I got distracted. I got involved in the independent film scene around San Francisco
Okay.
and East Bay, and I was doing some scripts and script consulting and voiceovers and treatments and things, and still working on some longer novels. And time went by. 10 years went by, and
10
I
years
didn't
went
have
by.
anything to show for it. And Freedom Voices reluctantly just kind of dropped me. I think they still carry Island Despair in their catalog, but they no longer saw me as in their stable of contributing writers. So there's a lesson in that story, right?
because I thought there was more. 'Cause when you mentioned that when I first met you, you said, yeah, I published the first book. Second book, I got distracted. And my mind went to okay, drugs or some sort of exciting life thing. But I'm hearing independent film was the distraction. Scripts and voice acting.
Voiceover. I was writing voiceover. And I got paid for some of this work, and a lot of it was just on spec. And on most of those movies, I'm not sure if any of them ever were completed. It's just a testimony to how many movies just flounder in pre-production.
Oh, yeah.
These were all independent filmmakers.
It's a feat. It's a feat to get any movie made, even with a studio behind it. But then when you have to depend on your friends and you have to depend on people to work for free, all kinds of stuff just kind of flames out.
Sure.
Of course.
Yeah. That's the way that went. And also, I was traveling fairly relentlessly during that era. So, traveling is not writing. Traveling is its own thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The real lesson was that I should have stayed focused on the next book and just done that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You have eras in your life when you want to say yes to things, and I did that in my 40s. And film is exciting and it's kind of sexy, and some things could have worked out. They just didn't.
Of course.
And
Yeah, it could have been the right bet. Yeah.
Yeah, I just eventually cut my losses and came back to the Intermountain, back out to the Rockies. Essentially, I was living in Jackson,
Wyoming. Nice.
And
you're from Wyoming originally? Okay,
Virginia.
So you're from Wyoming as an adult.
Yeah, right.
You're from Virginia originally.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious because you have this travel deliberately as kind of your brand, kind of the idea, the philosophy behind what you seem to be doing with your life, and the idea. How would you summarize that idea? I don't want to summarize it for you. How would you summarize the philosophy?
I try to spell it out on the website that it's all of us like to travel, and there's a certain modern concept of what that is, to just kind of sightsee and do things that are kind of distracting, eat out and drink coffee in a different place every day. That's traveling.
Yeah.
But I like to see people take it a step further. What's worked for me is to render the traveling experience in some sort of artistic form. And for me, it's writing, but it could be anything. It could be photography or music or painting or something. But I just think that forces the traveler to engage a little bit more with the experience they've had, and to communicate that to others, which I think if you have the privilege to travel, it's sort of incumbent upon you to render that experience, not just have it be a fleeting thing that passes. And it's whatever you want to do with yourself, but that's the concept of traveling deliberately, is to it comes from Thoreau's Live Deliberately.
Live deliberately.
From Walden, he was big on that.
He went to the woods to live deliberately. That's what he went to the woods for, to live deliberately.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
so it seems as though your the Alaska period of your life has been the most rendered into writing, as opposed to your Moab period of your life, your Jackson, your San Francisco period of your life. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say, because the only two books I've completed are Island Despair and Wet Exit.
Yes.
Wet Exit, which is a longer 3-part novel, but it just happens to take place in Alaska also on a sea kayaking expedition.
Yeah.
Right.
So why Alaska? What happened
it just
there?
kind of as I began to find my voice and my format, it just happened that the Alaska experience were the things that I'd done most recently and were the most vivid in my mind. So I could have picked other things. I'm working on another lengthy book now called Geyser Rush, which is about Yellowstone, which was a place I lived and worked well prior to Alaska, 10 years before ever going to Alaska. It just happened that the Alaska books got kicked off first. So, but now I'm on to a different thing.
So it's not a specific weight of the Alaska period of your life. That wasn't especially weighty. Although Alaska's exciting in itself. It's got sort of an allure. Like the climate's different, the days are, the way the night and day shift and all that stuff. It's remote. I mean, all that's pointed out in Island Despair. Like it's, there's an allure to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Alaska has a mystique in the American mind, particularly, that's almost not equaled by any other state. It's Jack London, it's the gold rush, it's all the Klondike, all these things that are wrapped up that have created this kind of mystique. A lot of it's false and it's just kind of made up, I mean, that's kind of what draws young people to Alaska. And then I went up there and had experiences that were very different from what are considered traditional Alaska narratives. But
so the book that you wrote about it is you call it a work of unfiction.
Yeah, that's just kind of a cutesy made up thing to.
It is cute.
Yeah, it's the fact that the book is about 60% true and about 40% fiction.
Okay.
In fact, when I wrote it originally, I used all the actual names of the characters.
Oh, really?
And then when it was going to be published, I mentioned that to the publisher, and they said, well, you have to change the names. So I sat down with some friends. We had a little party one evening in Jackson, and we got the Jackson phone book, and we used it to come up with other names for the characters. Just pull them out of the phone book, or mixed and matched, And I think the names suit the characters, and but that's the way that went. So, yeah, that's the only way I know how to write, is to base it on my actual experience.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows how much, that's kind of fiction in a way anyhow, but, and then just embroider and elaborate and expand upon that. So it becomes fictionalized, but it's not true fiction. So I just call it unfiction.
Unfiction. Yeah. It's catchy.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that an interviewer is gonna ask you about.
Unfiction. Yeah. I don't think I'm the originator of that term.
Okay.
I think other people have used it,
but
probably in a better way or different way. I don't know. It's just
In that vein, the main character, the narrator, the unreliable narrator, as you say in the book, is named Marlow. That's the name you go by as well.
Which is not my real name.
Not your real
either,
name.
Right.
It's a nickname.
Yeah.
It's a nickname for the main character as well.
Correct. That comes from the character, the narrator of Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad's great book. Some consider it the greatest short novel ever written. At least in the old days, when it was a white man's canon. Things have changed now, and so I don't know where Heart of Darkness stands.
The best white guy book ever written.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That'd be fun if we called it like that.
Most people are familiar with the story because of the movie Apocalypse Now.
Right.
It's loosely based on that same novel, and but I used Conrad's formatting as a kind of model to write initially. So the narrator goes into some sort of exotic place, has an intense experience, and then extracts himself and then writes his story.
Yeah.
And he writes it in a conversational way, which is the way Heart of Darkness is written, also conversational. And my real name is Mike, and I never really cared for it. It was just so common amongst my generation that when a friend started calling me Marlow, I just kind of went with that. And so that's become my name now.
When did they start calling you Marlow, and how?
It was actually a guy I was working with at a cannery in Alaska who couldn't remember. He was trying to remember my last name, and he thought it was Melbourne or Marlow. And then just suddenly a bell went off, and I thought, Marlow. Maybe I should just go with that instead of Mike. More distinctive.
Yeah, it is.
And my last name is Mewborn, spelled with an M, not an N. A common name in the Piedmont region of Virginia, but not very common elsewhere, and it's often misspelled and mispronounced. So I'm changing my nom de plume to Mars short for Marlow, Mars Radcon. Radcon is Conrad with the syllables.
Ha ha ha!
switched
Radcon,
around.
a spoonerism
Yeah.
or
So
something.
Something.
Yeah.
So that I'm just going to go with that now.
What is it? Radcon is the last name. The first name is what?
Mars.
Mars Radcon.
You know, I've gone by Marlow for 30 years. It often gets shortened to Mars as
Sure.
a kind of nickname of a nickname. So I'm going to go with Mars Radcon.
That's awesome.
That's a recent shift.
How does that feel to shift your name? Changing your name is so intense. It's like it feels like it needs to be symbolically significant, and to do it at this stage of your life, no offense, must feel strange.
It's a little it's a little strange, but I was used to the Marlow shift. I lived on a commune for a while in Virginia. For 3 years, I lived at a place called Twin Oaks Community. It's one of the last remaining of the back to the land communes of the late 60s. Still going strong. 100 people,
Wow.
20 kids. It was based on originally on Walden 2, a B.F. Skinner's utopian novel, Walden 2. It's deviated quite a bit from the philosophy that the book is premised on, but because there's no charismatic leader, there's no official religion, it's labor sharing, income sharing, egalitarian, consensus decision making. Those are the things that have allowed Twin Oaks to prosper, where other communes of that sort foundered.
Yeah, there's no leader on top who gets to have sex with all the women.
Correct.
So why even have a commune at all? You know what I
gotta
mean?
wonder.
Yeah.
But well, there were orgies and days when everyone on the commune dropped acid. So you know,
great.
So there
perfect.
was some of the vestiges of the old '60s commune life, but mainly it's just an interesting experiment in living in adults, smart, well-read, educated adults trying to figure out what do people really need to be happy.
Yeah.
How much work, how much leisure, how much privacy, how much community, children, not children. And it was great. And it held me for 3 years during an era when I stayed nowhere for 3 years. It was just, and I would probably still be there if it was located out west and not in the Piedmont of Virginia.
Okay, so was that the first venture out? Because I'm so curious as how you end up going from how does this whole thing start? How do you become this person?
It really started because I originally went to the Air Force Academy out of high school, Colorado. My father was a pilot and an Air Force officer. I don't know. I wasn't that into flying, but I got a presidential appointment from Nixon. He only appointed 100 guys to go. So
wow.
I took the appointment.
To go to the Air Force Academy?
In Colorado Springs.
And then something you apply for,
Yeah,
and then you get a presidential appointment.
Or you could get a congressional, I think, or senatorial.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You have to have an appointment from an elected representative.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the way it works. At all the military academies, West Point or Naval Academy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I went, and I wasn't a very good fit. And I was the first I was the first cadet to successfully go AWOL from the Air Force Academy.
Congratulations.
By successful, I mean I got away with it. I left in the middle of the night. I was there for about 8 months, 9 months, and increasingly unhappy.
Okay.
I enjoyed basic training, but I didn't enjoy the academic year. And I
so
wasn't
it was
that
the
motivated.
it was the school it was the school part of it that you didn't.
Correct. That's
Wow.
Yeah.
Not the militarism and because I'm seeing you as a hippie, proto-hippie.
Yeah. Well, that came later, but yeah, I was raised in a military environment.
Okay.
And I had no trouble functioning. I had run cross country in high school, so I had no trouble with all the running and the athletics. And maybe I should have joined the Marines instead of gone to the Air Force Academy, but I went to the Air Force. And once the academic year started, I was not happy.
Why not?
I'm not really happy in classrooms and sitting at desks. I'm a studious person, and I read a lot, and I, have my sort of quasi-academic discipline, but I was not, I don't know. You go to a place like that when you're 18, it's very rigorous, and you owe 5 years to the Air Force after you leave, so there's your first decade of your young adulthood.
Right.
And I just wasn't ready to go down that road.
Yeah.
I just thought life had more possibilities. And I couldn't explain it to my family. I was such an easygoing, compliant kid that I had no vocabulary for, or no way to articulate why I was unhappy or what I would even do next. So my choice was to just leave in the middle of the night. And I escaped to Garden City, Kansas.
Okay.
Just a place I picked on the map because it sounded good.
How'd you get there?
Took a bus out
Okay.
of Sea Springs and was there for 6 months working different manual labor jobs.
And I'm sure you got a call or something. Well, they can't call you.
Well,
what happens?
I was on an FBI wanted list, and they had an APBs out, and
AWOL.
I actually had bought a motorcycle, so I drove it back to the academy at one point, thinking I would turn myself in, but I was just too free and too enjoying just being on my own.
That's a hell of an origin story. So you
that
left on a motorcycle.
Yeah. So that was leaving the fold for the first time. I did eventually go back to a regular college.
Okay.
And I can attribute that experience to being exposed to a lot of writers. I switched from business to English major, and I read Heart of Darkness, and that was it for me. That story so put its hook in me that I could no longer really go back to class. And I just waffled a little bit, and finally I just dropped out, and I came west, and I worked in Yellowstone.
What about the book? Do you think got its hooks in you so clearly?
Well, it was partly the narrator's voice. It was the idea of exotic travel, going somewhere beyond civilization's grip, and going into a realm where relative morality begins to have its play, and then writing a piece of literature based on that experience. It just seemed like the perfect model for how to go about it.
Was Conrad writing from experience?
Yeah, he had been a steamboat captain on the Congo and encountered ivory traders, and it's based loosely on his experiences at the Congo. Right.
So he's your number one.
Great.
He's your guy.
Yeah, he's my guy. And
Radcon.
Of course, it took a number of years to find my own voice and find a method. There was quite a bit of floundering and experimenting. It took another 10 years before I began to write in the way I write.
And at that point, you're in your 30s.
I was 30.
You're 30, and you had been to Alaska at that point, because your main character.
Correct. I'd been up there twice at that point, but the island despair, living on the island, working the canneries, and then being a pizza cook.
So you were a pizza cook, because you write very extensively. I cracked this open. I was ready for like a travel log, a real, like a sort of like, I went here, I went there, I met this person, I met that person. I learned a lot about pizza kitchens and how they work.
Maybe more than you ever wanted to know.
I was very surprised, but the way you write about it is like so. I mean, obviously you've done it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the detail of the ovens and the prep work.
I hope it wasn't overwritten.
It wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
It wasn't. I was surprised. I mean, like, I tore through it, and it surprised me, honestly. Like, if you had told me I was going to be reading this much about pizza cooking, I wouldn't have believed you.
It's an Alaska story, sure.
Yeah, exactly,
Right,
Alaska story.
right.
But I like the idea that it was that this pizza place is sort of a holdout from the lower 48. It's like a taste of home for the tourists, and a bit of normalcy for the people who have been there a long time, a bit of Americana, like you're still in America, even though you're up here among the Tlingit and the native people, and you're under all this nature stress. You still have the pizza.
Yes. It also
beer.
Symbolizes the colonization of the cultural colonization.
Yes.
The creeping culture of the lower 48 convenience culture creeping into the bush communities and basically obviating what was there before, the white person bush community, but also the native, the Aborigine, which was already decimated by that point, but slowly it was being totally paved over. Yeah.
And I read some Edward Abbey at your suggestion as well. I'm reading Desert Solitaire right now, and he has a polemic against the sort of like the paving of the roads in the national parks and who it brings in and who we're catering to and what we're erasing. What are we getting for what we're giving up?
Yes, right. Yeah, good.
Thank you very much. So Alaska. Where are we at? I want to go back.
Well, there was the going AWOL.
Thank you.
And then kind of being talked into going back to college.
By your parents?
Yeah.
That's what parents do.
That's what parents do. And
they want the best for you.
And it was, even though I ended up dropping out of that school too, I was there 2 years. And
which school was this?
Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia.
Okay, back to Virginia.
Yeah, I think that year it made Playboy magazine's top 10 party school list.
And it still couldn't hold you.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, no, it couldn't.
It still couldn't hold you.
But it also had a very strong English department. It was known for that. And I just fortuitously lucked into that situation and was had a couple of good professors who exposed me to a lot of great writing, Steinbeck and Conrad and Hemingway and, you know, the old white man canon.
The white guy. That's what I was just going to say.
I hope that's all changed now, and I believe it has.
It has, certainly, yeah.
But that's the way it was then in late 70s.
Late 70s.
Yeah, right. And I dropped out. I had a contract to work in Yellowstone Park, and having nothing else to do, I came out west and worked there, and that opened up that whole life of seasonal work and travel and wilderness and crazy romances and supporting some sort of artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
I ran into bohemians that were doing that, and I thought, this is it. This is the way to go, and I have basically been doing that for the last 40 years.
So I'm curious as to where this started. You ride a recumbent bicycle with your dog. You're living in a cave. You're camping in a hostel, and it seems to be all in service of this sort of traveling deliberately, sort of being in it, experiencing it.
Yeah, you know, some people would probably have trouble with my definition or my use of the term travel because I usually go somewhere and stay put for a while and get below the surface, and it's partly not to service the stories or the writing. It's just my nature to, if I get somewhere and it kind of works and it's interesting and there's some mild adventure to it or happenstance and it keeps my interest, I'll stay for a while.
Yeah.
I don't travel the way most people imagine, you know, just relentlessly moving. There's been plenty of that, but the novels tend to come out of the places where I've stayed put for 6 months or years.
Yeah, the Marlow of the novel is that he only intends to stay there in Alaska for a summer. He stays over the winter, and he doesn't like it, and he goes, I can't do another winter, but he's there all summer, and he almost stays for another winter.
Yeah, almost, so 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think. In this story, Geyser Rush, it starts in Oregon, where the narrator reads Peter Jenkins' great book, A Walk Across America, which was a very influential book to people who were young back in the 70s. You know, a disenchanted young guy who was in college during the Watergate, Vietnam era, and just nothing seemed relevant, so he dropped out of school, got a sponsorship from National Geographic, and walked across America. It took him 3 years, and halfway across, he met his then, or the woman that became his wife. She walked the rest of the way.
She walked with him?
Yeah, from New Orleans to the coast. But a couple of books came out of that, which the narrator of Geyser Rush thinks, well, that's great. I'll try that. I'll try walking. Or just hit the roads of America and walk. So there was kind of an episodic aspect to that book where he walks for a while, doesn't work that great. He takes a job on a fishing boat, does that for a while, and then ends up back in Yellowstone, where the thrust of the novel occurs. But there is some of that episodic, what we would really call travel, you know, at the first part. Right?
This is more like the travel.
What we think of as travel.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So there's that. But yeah, generally it's the narrator stays put and gets his story from being in a place for months or years.
But that's like under the headline of your website. It says something like that. Like if you're not doing this, you're just sightseeing. It's like if you're not traveling deliberately, you're just sightseeing, I think.
Yeah, if you're there's little
pop quiz.
Little bits on the website. If you're not being changed by your travel, then it's just sightseeing.
Yeah. And you need to stay long enough to be changed.
Right.
And I like the idea of embedding yourself in like the economy and your main character in that book kind of feels himself being more and more embedded in this sort of seedy underbelly of this town, even though he feels morally above it. He's trying to be in it and not of it, but he ends up seeing a path in his life where he could be sucked into the sort of undercurrent of this town, even though he's not, quote unquote, one of those people. He feels himself being
well stated. That's
sucked
a good
in.
rendering of the plot. Right, and he doesn't want to stay there any longer. He's got to get out. He's got to leave this island, right?
And even when because his love interest, even in the projected future in which he gets his love interest out of there into some other place like Seattle or the other town in Alaska, he says, and I'd stay there for a few years until she got okay, and then I'd move on. So he isn't even saying he promises to be with this woman forever. He just wants to get her out of the place she's at, kind of set her up somewhere else, and then continue. So he's that devoted to moving on that even when he's conceiving his next step, he's saying, I'll be there for a couple of years, but I'm not going to stay.
He knows his nature, that he won't stick for a while.
Yeah.
He knows he could do it for 18 months or sometime, and then, he'll have to go.
And you say his nature, but you do mean your nature to an extent.
It's also my nature.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, which is also true. I don't know. Moab's kind of got its hooks in me right now.
Yeah, how long you been here?
A year.
Okay.
And
but you've been in Utah for a couple of years.
No,
right?
Not really. I mean, I was in and out of Moab for 30 years.
Okay.
Just after reading Ed Abbey and checking it out. I used to have an office over here on Main Street for the filmmaking stuff, but once that kind of didn't happen, and then Moab was getting a little bit gentrified and rents were going up, I dropped it. But I used to come here in the winters. I would spend summers in Jackson Hole working for the airlines out at the airport.
Oh, cool.
American Airlines. And then the dog and I would ride down. It would take a month to get down here and spend the winter. And I camped in the office some. Sometimes I camped other places, but I had the office.
You could live in the office? You're not really.
Yeah, you could then. A number of us were. They've clamped down on that.
Yeah.
Moab's becoming a little more straight-laced
Yeah.
all the time, even as we speak. But there were a number of winters here. Suffice it to say, a number of winters spent here. Yeah.
And you were saying that the hostel you're at is sort of a hearkening back to the hippie days of Moab.
Yeah, Moab, it went through its uranium boom, and then that busted. And then a lot of hippies and artists move in because real estate was cheap.
After the boom, because there's no more industry.
Yeah, there was, and you could also just live outdoors easy. And the town was small and quiet, and there was lots of. When I first came here in the late 80s, I hitched up here from Tucson just to check it out. I was able to, it was open dispersed camping along the river. It was just a crazy, wild scene. Hundreds and hundreds of people all along the miles of riverfront. And
with no regulation or anything?
No regulation, nothing. And it was just a massive endless party. And it was too much for me. I stayed out there a couple of days. It was noisy. I couldn't sleep. So I hitched back into town. I was able to pitch a tent right on Main Street. And I stayed for a week. No one cared. No one even noticed. But you would be arrested within 10 minutes. If you did that. That's just
for
how
a
things
week
changed. Yeah,
on Main Street.
Kind of back, in the bushes a little bit, but I made no effort to be really concealed. It just no one cared.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how quiet. And
those days are over now.
Yeah, things are well over. You can hardly find a place, anywhere within town limits where you can do that.
Yeah.
I know a couple guys who do, and they won't even tell you where they're camped. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
Rare commodity to find a campsite. But yeah, I'm happy with the way I'm camping now. I don't need to squat in the bush out there, but this is fine. But so there's been some relationship with Moab off and on, but I've now been here 1 year continuously.
Okay.
And have gone through the heat of the summer, and it's not that bad. And we'll see. I may stick around. Yeah,
because the cave's a good situation. The guy doesn't mind.
Good for the summers.
Good for the summers.
Hostel's good for the winters.
Nice.
I'm doing some volunteering with some of us guys. We go around and we collect excess food from places and distribute it. It's called Free Meal, and that's pretty fun. And the virus kind of put a damper on it, but
sure.
We think it'll kick back up once
Yeah. Well, people are still serving food.
Yeah, we're still able to do it. I just do it a couple days a week. It's very low commitment. It's a couple hours each of those days, to pick up stuff.
And where do you think you're going to go next? If there's next.
I don't have a burning desire. I've been thinking about Slab City.
In California.
Yeah, where the kid from
Chris
Into the
McCandless.
Wild, Chris McCandless. Thanks. I honestly don't have a whole lot of curiosity about anywhere else. I've kind of run myself dry at this point. That's the way it is.
What is Slab City? What appeal does that have for you?
Well, it's I like the leveling effect of that place. Everyone who's there's only maybe about 5 people who actually stay year-round. Everyone else is a visitor.
Okay.
I like places where everyone is meeting on a sort of equal footing, no matter what their demographic or level of affluence. I'm intrigued by places like that. I'm intrigued by places that are kind of sort of post-apocalyptic, like a little feeling of our future or what things could come to. I'm intrigued by places where people bottom out too. I think that's interesting existentially that's kind of what drew me to Petersburg and some places in
Alaska. Yeah.
Where people are making one last effort to salvage their life. Some of that doesn't come out in Island of Despair so much. There's more of that in Wet Exit, the second book, but I'm drawn to places like that, as was Conrad. He liked to go where human nature is starkly revealed because all the props and the facades are stripped away. I like that.
What about that? What about the? You said that we might be headed there. Is that what you think? Do you have that kind of pessimistic view of the human experiment with capitalism and with the American experiment?
I don't think I'm too off base thinking that we're already in a kind of a downfall. We've got environmental problems, and the virus isn't really the result of it's not a part of the same things that contribute to climate change, although the virus is probably attributable to overdevelopment, overpopulation, hypermobility.
Yep.
Those are some things that also contribute to or other environmental degradation. So it's all tied in, I guess. But I just think I worry about the ocean ecosystems collapsing. I guess there's already dead zones and huge areas of plastic, and there's die-offs of large fish species. And if the oceans start to collapse, it's not going to be so good for the terrestrial life forms either,
man.
And things could cascade. I don't really see a calamitous downfall. I see more of a slow grinding as things just kind of give out, We just try to cope and deal, and probably a big adjustment in human populations and other species, Extinction Crisis. There it is.
Fun stuff.
I don't know why a person wouldn't look at those things squarely and say, this is kind of where we're headed. We can ameliorate, we can do what we can to stave off some of this.
Triage the situation, but
it seems that
but we're headed to all going to be
places like Slab City seem like a foretaste.
Let's get ready for it.
Right.
Let's get our cookware ready. Let's get our propane cookware and our non-gasoline transportation, and let's get it all set for the end.
And also our social structures. Things, you begin to get a glimpse of how people might cooperatively deal with some of the crises. I don't know. Those are all factors.
I want to ask you about the in the book, the main character has a code he's always referring to. He's building his code. He's living by his code. He keeps referring to this code and whether or not he's living by it or not. What is your code? What is his code? What are you talking about here with this code of ethics, way of living?
It's a little bit exaggerated in the book. It's not really my code. It's I give it to the narrator. I guess it was something I kind of lived by a little bit when I was younger, and I had a sense of obligation to employers who took me on to
he wants to give back.
Do my job, learn it, and then give them some return for all the effort they put into me. I think that still operates in my life. I'm no longer working a day job. I'm on the Social Security, so now I write full time. In fact, I went to Colorado at age 60 because I could qualify for the senior pension plan, so I could more readily quit the day job and write full time. Because all you had to do was be poor, be 60 years old, and be in Colorado for 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah. Or as long as it took you to go down and sign up.
That's great.
And it worked out fine. It wasn't a scam. It's just what they have, because Colorado's very progressive that way. So I did that for 2 years. And found that the place I was living, Fruta, I wasn't a particularly good fit, and so came back to Moab.
Fruta, Colorado?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it. I Googled you, and I found one of the results was the story in Fruta about the forest fire.
The Skipper Island fire.
Skipper Island fire,
Yeah.
which I think does speak to your code, because if I don't know if you don't mind talking
I
about
don't
it.
mind. No. It's an interesting episode for sure.
Yeah. What I read was it was like local. I don't know if they called you a vagrant or some sort of homeless guy, which is derogatory. Admits to starting forest fire, and you're very sad about it.
Yeah, I was. The basic outline of the incident: I was hiking with my dog down along the river in a place called Skipper Island, which is not really an island. There's a slough of the Colorado River that peels off a portion of the land. It doesn't flow all year, this slough, but at periods of time it does create an island, and it's called Skipper Island. Some friends and I thought that it was BLM. It is listed as BLM land. We had gone to the county assessor's website, and it was listed as BLM. So we were beginning to think we could camp there, and we had slept there a couple of nights. And then I was hiking with Flix. I took a bathroom break, and I was burning some toilet paper, and it got away from me. I didn't leave it. I just was right there watching it, and I could not put it out. That area's undergone a tremendous drought, and they had, I don't know, people will be familiar with the saga of the tamarask, an invasive species that inundated all these canyons in the Southwest. I think it's an Asian bush or something.
Okay.
And then we introduced a beetle, which would feed on the tamarask, and it was supposed to just move at a mile a year, but the beetle just went crazy too. So we've got canyons full of massive amounts of tamarask fuel. Anyway, that was...
What do you mean fuel? Like it's so dry?
Yeah, it's so dry. Yeah, it's fuel for fires.
Right.
Right, and it's a problem. So my little toilet paper burning started the tamarask on fire, which is like, I think it's full of some kind of resin or something that burns like kerosene, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was right there, and I couldn't put it out. If I'd gone crazy on it and sacrificed my boots, I could have probably put it out, but by the time I realized that I should do that, it was too late. And I tried to get water from the river. I tried a number of things, and I realized I'm not going to be able to put this thing out. So I called 911, and I said, my name is Mike Mewborn. I accidentally started a fire. I need some help. I'll meet the fire crew at mile such and such on the interstate. So I hiked on up about 3 miles, met the crew. They showed up, but they wouldn't go in. They were balky for some reason.
They wanted to drive in, as the article said, but you wanted to get them to come in and help.
Yeah, really a couple of guys and some shovels, and we could have contained it, or maybe we'll put it out, but they just, I don't know, they were just reluctant. And they did eventually send a crew in, but the fire was out of control by then. The next day was the windiest day of the spring. The fire became a massive conflagration. I mean, it never burned like some of these Colorado fires. I think it burned over about 200 acres, but all that burned was the tamarask. It killed a couple of the big cottonwoods, but most of them survived.
Okay, good.
It was just a fast-moving brush fire. But it did jump the interstate, so the interstate got shut down.
Wow.
They diverted all interstate traffic through the town of Fruita. And then the power went out, or was actually cut preemptively as a precaution. And I was downtown. I'd actually gone into my camp and extracted all my gear and my friend's gear, and was in downtown Fruita drinking a cup of coffee, watching all the interstate traffic being diverted down the ramp, the massive cloud of smoke that looked like, a nuclear bomb had gone off just west of us, and the power's out, so everybody's out milling around. The grocery store's shut, everything's shut. And I saw a news crew in the parking lot filming all this for news out of Grand Junction. And I said, well, if they're still there when I get done with this cup of coffee, I'll go give them a statement. And I did. I walked up to them, and they said, can we help you? And I said, well, I'm the guy who started the Skipper Island fire. If you'd like a statement, I'll give you one. And boy, they had me mic'd up with the cameras turned around in 30 seconds. I was ready to go. And I warned them I may start crying because I'm pretty distraught about this whole thing, and I didn't sleep much last night. And they said, it's all right,
They're loving it. They'd be great.
Yeah. They were all, that would be more drama.
Yeah, they want the tears.
And I did get kind of choked up, but I just said, I'm very sorry for all the trouble. I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. I was burning some toilet paper, and it got out of control, and hopefully the crews will get in there. And actually, at that moment, they had sent a tanker out to do fire suppression. You know, they extract water from a pond or something, and then it was a helicopter tanker.
Okay, tanker.
So they were already doing drops, and it was getting under control. And by the next day, it was out. A very expensive operation, but that's what they chose to do. The fire crews weren't having much luck. It was just kind of the wind and everything, so they brought in the heavy artillery and got it done. And but then I was on the hook for it, you know, and had to get a
legally.
Legally, yeah. That's what happens out west. They find the person that started it, and then they're prosecuted.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
So you could have dodged it. This is your code. You could have dodged it. You could have not done anything.
Yeah, I could have dodged it, but it's just not my nature. I actually thought that if I owned up to what I did, I thought maybe the fire crew would own up to their culpability, their failure to go in.
And they did?
No, they didn't step forward.
Think so.
Guess not. You know,
I didn't think so.
Yeah. But my public defender was able to get a hold of the tapes. You know, when you interact with a fire crew at their vehicle, it's all taped. Plus the
your actual conversation?
Actual conversation with the fire crew, as well as my conversation with the dispatcher. So she was able to show that yes, I started the fire, and that was my responsibility. But from then on, I tried to be a responsible citizen and report it, and that it was the fire crew's hesitation and reluctance to go in. And so I got off with just some community service and a small fine.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good lawyer.
She was good. She was a public defender and new to the job, so she still had energy, and a lot of those people burn out.
Yeah, that's the key.
Tough job, not much pay, but
get someone young.
She did a good job.
Yeah.
And I was very pleased, and I had my day in court, and it was fine. And I was facing a Chevron Oil owns a lot of the land along the river. They use it to access water for their operations, and some of the fire had encroached on their property, and
what will Chevron do? Will Chevron be okay?
They were, guess what? They wanted me to pay them $100,000.
Come on.
Yeah. But after the public defender dug up the defense, they dropped the suit. They realized they were going to have to probably go after the city fire department, who were as equally culpable. So that's the way it went. It was an interesting thing, and it kept me in Fruta longer than I probably would have stayed. The wheels of justice grind slowly. So it took 6 months before I finally had my final hearing. And then I had a winter's worth of community service, which was actually quite fun. I went down and worked with the city crew, the guys that dig the ditches and the sewers, and they just gave me all kinds of jobs that were, it was good. It was kind of a lack of volunteer opportunities anyway in Fruta, so that was my volunteering.
There you go.
Winter. So that was interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I really respect the owning up to it, and you seemed like you were legitimately regretful of you really regretted not being able to help and fix the fire faster.
True. There's another component to that. All these canyons, they probably need a fire. We've been suppressing fires in the West. Everyone knows the problems with the fuel loads building up. That fire is a natural part of the cycle, and then we just don't do that because we have too many human habitations and structures. So that canyon or that riverfront benefited from the fire.
Of course.
It cleaned out all that tamarask, and it kicked off all kinds of natural cycles that had been, held it in check because of it. So I don't have any regrets.
So you're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. They should probably have paid me to do it.
Yeah, how about $100,000?
But I'm sorry for the trauma it put everybody through. It really was scary.
Yeah.
And it scared people, and there was a moment when they thought they were going to have to evacuate Fruta. The fire was moving towards town rapidly, blown by westerly winds, and it was scary. And I'm sorry for that, and I'm sorry for the expense that they had to do in order to protect the town and farms and ranches and stuff. So, yeah. That's wasn't my choice to have it go down like that.
But it was an interesting article. I think it was very telling of your character and of the code that you seem to live by. That you owned up to it, and you were very sorry, and you're legitimately emotionally affected by having done that.
And people responded to that.
Good. You weren't a pariah in Fruta, the man who started the fire.
No. It was confusing to a lot of people who wanted to script it a certain way. They wanted to see it as a homeless guy who got drunk and let his campfire get away.
Yeah.
But the narrative ran contrary to that, and I got a little bit of bad vibe from folks who didn't know what to make of me. Frankly, I was just such a alien creature in their environment. They don't have a lot of homeless there, or guys on bikes, and they just don't have much of that.
Yeah.
It's a conservative ranching community. But I had some people come up. I had a father come up to me with tears in his eyes and say, "My son and I were watching you on the news last night, and I was telling my son, see, you should take responsibility for errors or things that you do. See what that guy did?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I just want to thank you for being straight ahead."
Yeah, that guy writing a check for $100,000 to Chevron Oil. That guy's
that guy. And I had that response from a couple of people, and I was just doing what I felt I had to do. But
yeah.
I'm just saying that I wasn't a pariah. That people were sorry. A lot of people were just sorry I went through it.
Yeah.
And they said, many of them said, "Well, you started the fire, you stood up and took your medicine. Good on you, but
oh, yeah.
maybe don't camp down there anymore." I sort of lost all legitimacy as a outdoors person. So
don't camp down there anymore.
So I didn't do that anymore.
It brings up an interesting point, though, about the way people perceive you and interact with you. As someone who doesn't have a home that they rent or that they live in, you seem very comfortable with that fact. And obviously there's a stigma around homelessness, as people would call it. How are you dealing with that here in Moab and in other places that you've lived?
Well, Moab is much more tolerant of people who camp. It's just sort of part of the town's culture and past and so forth. Nevertheless, there is a growing stigma against those who don't live indoors or don't rent or have a habitation. People are free to live any way they want. I find that living that way is stultifying. I do better the more I'm outdoors. And if I'm camping, I'm sleeping in a tent or, sleeping in a cave, but nevertheless, I'm getting more exposure to natural forces and weathers and systems and nature and all kinds of things you don't even imagine are going to happen. I'm better off the more I do that. So I don't really care what people think.
Yeah.
And I push back on it quite a bit. I say, a lot of people maybe would be happier this way. It's certainly lower carbon.
For everybody,
way to live, Yeah. And for the bohemian, the person whose life is organized around an artistic pursuit, and we're in competition with all the rest of the culture for the things we need to live, it is one answer. You can live more cheaply if you camp, live in a place where you can get around by bike, and it gives you a little edge up against all the folks who have nothing that compelling going on, and they're free to work a job full time because there's nothing pulling at them, no other pursuit that they'd rather be after. So that's always been the plight of the bohemian.
Yeah, when you're reclaiming your time, you're not selling your time to an employer. You're reclaiming your own time for your artistic pursuits.
Correct.
Yeah.
In addition to that kind of lifestyle, actually being, it is harder and there's more hardship, but it's, I often think about the term authenticity. What's authentic? What's authentic goes back to how we lived when we were more aboriginal, and we had to deal with landscape and weather and climate and seasons and our own physicality. That's the closer you get to that state, the more authentic you are living.
Yeah.
And I find the closer I get to that state, just the happier I am, the more engaged I am. So yeah, I don't expect to. Well, when I'm on the list for senior housing in Moab.
Nice.
And they called me about a year ago and said, "Well, we've got some availability." And I said, "Could you call me again in about 10 years? I'm not ready, to go, because once you go into that box, man, it's over.
10 years.
You get weak and you lose your chops,
So not now.
Not now. Maybe in my 70s.
Yeah, okay.
I might be
7
ready
more
for that.
years, we'll talk.
Yeah, 10 more years.
10 more years, 73.
As long as I can do it.
Yeah, man.
It keeps you strong and vital, and I don't know why more people don't do it, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Even on a cold day, cold night, you don't think about a house?
No. But I take measures. I have insulation and good clothes, and I have my different heating systems.
Yeah.
I'm not into hardship. It's funny. People often think that if you don't go the furnished house route, then you have to go all the way and just sleep on bare ground or something. Like, no, there's lots of good gear out there, and there's good systems, and you don't need to be uncomfortable. I mean, there's always going to be discomforts, but you know what? There's no sin in being uncomfortable, despite what everyone in this culture tells you. Americans are not into it.
Yeah.
And it's not what drives the market. But to seek maximum comfort at all times, that's probably not the way to go.
Of course
a little
not.
Discomfort is okay.
Of course.
Honestly.
Yeah.
It won't kill you.
Yeah.
And it might even make you feel more alive.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
As a guy, I slept in the van last night. Yeah, and it was very cold.
I'm really encouraged by your generation going with the van life.
Well, you know what it is that we're broke.
Fine.
There's no prospect.
Yeah. Which is kind of the bohemian's dilemma a little bit. But aren't you also learning that there's something to this?
Absolutely. As opposed to working like a shit job, or like having like one of my friends just working over Zoom in your own house, just trapped in an apartment in New York City. Oh my God, people in New York right now, it just seems miserable. And to me, it was like it was the only option. It was the only thing I could think of to do right now is just like travel around. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that.
Yep.
Thanks to some money from the government.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's about all the time of yours I want to take. I want to point people to your website, traveldeliberately.com.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and you can donate there, and any it's a sliding scale donation for the books.
Sliding scale, you can read the books for free as a PDF. You don't need to buy them.
You're such a bad businessman.
I just want readership and connection. It's nice to get a little money to cover the overhead. Yeah. But that's no longer important. Yeah. I'm fine on the money I make.
That's awesome.
Fine, yeah.
I really recommend Island Despair. I read it in 5 hours. I read some last night and some this morning, and I breezed through it. It's very well written. It's descriptive.
Thank you, Terrence. It's great.
You're very welcome. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I didn't plan on reading the whole thing, and then I just got drawn in. Island Despair, I recommend. The other one is Wet Exit.
Wet Exit. It's a kayaking term for when you flip your kayak over and you're in it, and then you egress out of the cockpit underwater. It's called a wet exit. Whether you're in a river or ocean, that's just a term. But it's a good metaphor for what's going on with one of the characters. Escaping or thrusting themselves into life and just trusting. Right, not the narrator, but it's about a woman who's reinventing herself by taking these outdoor courses, and Wet Exit's a good metaphor for what she's doing.
And with a donation, you can get a handmade binding of one of these books.
Correct.
Handmade by the author, by Marlow.
Yeah. Until I get a regular publisher, this is what we're doing.
Not Plan A. It's Plan B.
I don't know. In some ways, even if I got a regular publisher, I'd say, well, you guys print and bind it any way you want, but I'd like to keep doing my thing for those who want that.
And it's quite a thing. It's got the cord as the bookmark. It's got a buckle to keep it shut.
There's webbing and D-rings and like pack buckles. It's made to look like a piece of travel gear.
It's an artifact. That's what I was saying. Like in this age of audiobooks and ebooks, like if you're going to buy a physical book, it should be cool looking. And this is what I would recommend. I'd recommend buying one of these.
Yeah, it does help it stand out. I'm getting some placement in bookstores, and we'll see how that goes. But they're telling me it gets people's attention.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else you want to say?
Oh no, Terrence, I really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Marlow.
Thanks for your great questions.
Yeah. Have a good one.
All right.